Many who don't know J. Mack Swigert will be surprised to learn
Mack is 97.
97 years old. How does he do it?
He has taken good care of all aspects of his life.
Still driving and walking long distances.
He continues to come to the office and participate.
Just unstoppable.
Ramrod straight.
Always trim. He's stayed that way the whole 50 years that I've known him.
He's a great golfer.
At 97?
Up until this fall, and he had some pain in his leg.
I remember him as a good tennis player.
But it isn't his athletic stature that brings us here tonight. What else?
He's been a giant in the legal profession.
He had a big reputation.
A legend.
I heard of him in law school. My labor law professor was a famous Watergate prosecutor, Archibald Cox.
It was said that businessmen would tell each other,
"Don't do anything before you talk to Swigert."
an enviable reputation. Let's see what makes this gentleman tick.
Mack is one of the most disciplined individuals that I've ever known.
His regular work habits today are not too different from what they were 50 years ago.
He's at the office. It's 9 in the morning.
Tell me what time of day it is and what day of the week. I can tell you what he's doing, what he's wearing.
Self-discipline and reliability don't make a legend, so let's begin at the beginning.
I was born in Carthage, Illinois, population of 3,000. I grew up and went to school in Des Moines.
And after Des Moines Roosevelt High School, what then?
I went to Grinnell College at Grinnell, Iowa.
A Harvard professor visited the college, extolling the benefits of his famous Ivy League school.
Well, it sounded good to me, so I was there.
He makes it sound easy. It wasn't.
Was graduated. Well, I took a trip to the Far East.
He begged, borrowed, and worked his way from Boston to Manchuria so he could write an accurate paper about the Far East for graduate school.
It sounds like fiction, but this is a true story.
I wish we could tell it all, but we still have over 70 years to cover.
In the summer of 1931, I married my wonderful wife, and she prevailed on me to enter law school.
And after earning his law degree, he
Practiced law in Chicago for a year.
then came the call from Cincinnati's Taft, Stettinius, and Hollister.
My wife, she said, okay, and we've been here ever since.
But it was not until 1946 that he did the work that would bring him into the national spotlight.
In 1935, the Wagner Act had been enacted
The act intended to build union power.
with no employer rights.
In 1946,
There was a chaotic situation.
labor bosses wanted everybody out on strike. They had just shut down the country.
5,000 large strikes.
The Republican Party took over, and
Robert A. Taft chose to be chairman of the Senate Labor Committee. He called on Mr. Swigert.
The Wagner Act needed some changes made.
Swigert told Senator Taft there was no need to repeal the act.
changes in there would solve the problem.
So the legislation was drafted.
He was intimately involved.
It took weeks and weeks of debate.
It was vetoed by President Truman.
But the veto was overruled by a
Two-thirds majority in Congress.
And so the Taft-Hartley Act became law, but it was immediately assailed by the labor bosses in the national press.
Mr. Swigert became irritated and decided to write an article.
He had an article in the Saturday Evening Post about the Taft-Hartley law.
This article became a runaway hit.
Mack became well known throughout the country.
It was very exciting.
And many credited Mack Swigert's article for saving the Taft-Hartley law.
That law, with just minor changes, has survived for some 60 years. It's been a significant factor in the success of the American economy.
And it's no surprise that Mack Swigert then
Established a labor department at Taft, Stettinius, and Hollister.
and became a partner and later the managing partner of the firm.
He was one of the best bosses I've ever seen anywhere, in law firms or in industry.
I learned a lot from him. He always wanted to have your input.
He was very supportive of his associates.
Working with Mack, you learn to put the client first.
He was an inspiration to everyone.
He could dictate a brief.
25 pages later, turn to the secretary and say, I'm going to make an insert.
He'd make a few edits, and you'd have a finished product to go to an appeals court.
He would take cases that many of us would view as losers.
And when those cases went to trial,
He had an instinctive feel for litigation. He was always prepared. He knew the law, he knew the facts, and he knew his opponents.
And he was just as successful at the bargaining table as he was in the courtroom.
Everybody in organized labor knew him.
The style at the time was pounding your fist. Mack wouldn't have any of that.
Mack would never hesitate to go across the picket line. They didn't care how violent they were.
And the picketers would start to chant,
"Here comes Mack the Knife."
A Chicago court reporter told Robert Stackler about their impressions of Mack.
We expected this giant of a man. In comes this very small individual, but as the trial went on, he looked bigger and bigger.
Proving that Mack Swigert's physical stature has never impeded his talents or his ingenuity.
He's a man of huge accomplishments.
Mack has participated in the community. He's been a participant, he's been a leader.
Just a good human being.
Ladies and gentlemen, the man who helped to save our economic well-being, great living Cincinnatian, J. Mack Swigert.